On the 50th floor, a half-kilogram measuring tape slipped out of a construction worker's hands. In its fall, the tool achieved the speed of the mightiest tornado, 225 kilometers per hour. At that moment, Gary Anderson was standing on the ground. He was supposed to have already left, but stopped to chat with someone. He probably didn't even feel the measuring tape land directly on his head. The impact was so devastating that Gary died within an hour. It wasn't the tape that killed him, however. As it turned out, Gary wasn't wearing a helmet, although it was lying in his truck, and he was an experienced worker. In this video, I'll tell you about deaths that could have easily been avoided, so viewer discretion is advised. 33-year-old John O'Neill had a fair share of hardship in his life, not least because of his alcohol addiction. He lost touch with his family and friends and, finally, was forced to wear an electronic tag on his ankle. So, in the fall of 2024, O'Neill decided to take his fate into his own hands, underwent a rehabilitation course, sobered up, and returned to what he loved doing most, woodworking. On the morning of September 24th, he started his first day at work, which only took 15 minutes to turn into an utter hell. O'Neill was working near a wood chipper, throwing branches into the machine, when suddenly, one of them got caught on his ankle bracelet. When he realized this, it was already too late. The mechanism had pulled him in. Shocked, O'Neill was watching the metal blades crushing his bones and calling for help. Yet, nobody heard him, as all his colleagues were working in headphones. It took the other workers an entire minute to see the horror unfolding behind their backs. You can imagine what a mechanism like this can do to a person in as little as 60 seconds. O'Neill's colleagues pulled him out of the wood chipper and applied improvised tourniquets made of whatever was at hand. Nobody believed the man would survive, not even O'Neill himself. He was dipping in and out of consciousness and saying farewell to his life, and for good reason. O'Neill's heart stopped beating on the way to the hospital. When he woke up in his ward the following day, he saw only the empty bed before him. Both of his legs were amputated above the knee. The surgeons had to transfuse 8.5 liters of blood into him, virtually replacing the bloodstream in his body twice over. O'Neill is convinced it was the structure of the electronic tag that caused him to be pulled into the wood chipper. However, it looks like he did violate safety regulations, thus making this tragedy possible in the first place. Alongside that, the closeness of death pushed O'Neill to make up with his family and work on himself like never before. And if O'Neill was lucky enough to survive a close encounter with a wood chipper, a tree trimmer from California was not. On an October morning in 2022, he was doing his job in the city of Menlo Park, and in the afternoon, he was found dead inside a wood chipper. No one knows exactly how the tragedy happened, but there's no doubt the tree trimmer made an unfortunate mistake that cost him his life. Sadly, safety rule violations in the workplace often cause bad accidents that could have been avoided. This is what happened in April of the year 2000 at a tire service in Montezuma. Two brothers got a task to patch up a crack on the rim of a tractor-trailer wheel. They had to disassemble it, then remove the tire, and only then start welding. That was the only correct way of doing the job. However, one of the brothers, Robert, decided instead to only deflate the tires and start trying to patch up the crack with a welding torch on an intact wheel. He knew that not deflating the tire would make it explode. That's because the air inside it would expand when heated and have nowhere to go. At some point, the tire would give in to the pressure. So, the mechanic, sure of his safety, was busy welding the crack when, suddenly, a powerful explosion happened. With an indomitable force, the metal rim of the 120-centimeter wheel hit the man on the head, instantly taking his life. The explosion was so intense that a pickup truck was kicked off its lift, and the echo was heard as far as 1.5 kilometers from the workshop. There was most likely water inside the tire. The heat from the welding torch made it boil and turn into vapor, filling the empty space. The tire could have also contained volatile gases like butane or propane, used in fast repair kits. Robert even received the Darwin Prize since he only had to observe one rule to stay alive: to take the tire off before any work on the rim. To think that this tragedy happened to a professional in his workplace. What can we say about the less legal ways of making money then? Back in the early 2010s, Germany faced an unexpected problem. Thieves started robbing ticket machines. Hundreds of cases happened all over the country in a year, and the perpetrators weren't always caught. However, in March of 2017, at Dartmouth Scharnhorst railway station, a ticket machine robber failed to get away. At 2 a.m., a 31-year-old man came to the station to rob the machine. It's unknown whether he'd used compressed gas to fill the inside of the mechanism or if the tool had been a makeshift explosive device. There was a sudden massive explosion, and the 2-meter-tall metal panel was torn off the machine and hurled right at the robber. When emergency services arrived at the scene, they saw a damaged mechanism and, beside it, an unconscious man with horrific head trauma. The service workers tried to resuscitate him, but their attempts were in vain. And this case is far from being the only one. On Christmas Eve in 2015, a man died in Münster after using a makeshift explosive to blow up a condom vending machine and take the money that was in it. In October 2018, a young guy died after a ticket machine explosion at Halle railway station. But the paradox is that it's not only those who violate state laws and get themselves killed. People also die from forgetting about the laws of physics. A tragedy of that kind happened in Libreville, the capital of Gabon, to 35-year-old Franck Cabel, a pastor evangelist. One day, having gathered his congregation for another sermon, he claimed to have received a revelation. It stated that if the pastor's faith was strong enough, he'd be able to reenact Jesus' biblical miracle of treading water. Cabel didn't have the slightest doubt in his faith as he immediately gathered his flock on the beach. The pastor was going to not just showcase his water-treading skills. He was set to cross the Gabon estuary. This distance requires a boat 20 minutes to pass, since it's about 11 kilometers. Cabel took his first steps but seemed to be sinking for some reason. However, he stayed true to his faith and walked until he was entirely submerged in water. The man drowned. I'm in no way trying to discredit Christianity or any other religion. However, apart from blind faith, Cabel could have also relied on common sense. And seeing that he wasn't exactly succeeding at repeating the biblical miracle, he could have just returned to the shore and investigated the reasons for his failure later. A couple from Philadelphia also struggled to stay afloat. Two lovers were driving in a car at night before stopping on the riverbank. It was a chilly August morning, which probably made them think of getting warm in the back seat. Or maybe they were inspired by a nearby bridge named Strawberry Mansion. The couple started making love and was probably doing it so passionately that one of them accidentally pushed the gear lever. The car started moving and fell into a river seconds later. In the blink of an eye, the water filled the vehicle with the terrified couple inside it, and their 4x4 sank to the bottom. Rescuers only arrived 5 hours later to find the flooded car 100 meters away from the riverbank and the scared, wet lovers on the shore. By some miracle, the couple managed to escape the trap and was even lucky enough to get their off-roader back. A similar predicament was shared by a young couple from Russia's Vologda region. Yevgeny and Yana also parked their car on the shore of a lake and started having fun in the back seat. Just like in the previous case, the car rolled into the water, but the Russian couple never made it out of the vehicle, and both of them died. Truth be told, even the most innocuous entertainment or simple rest can turn out deadly. Mrs. Elizabeth Isherwood's trip to a country club near the town of Machynlleth, Wales, in late September of 2017 wasn't the first or even the 10th for her. Together with her ex-husband, she'd owned a holiday home in the resort for 30 years. Mrs. Isherwood often visited the property with her friends, but eventually decided to sell the house and was gifted a voucher for the last free stay. On September 23rd, she made use of it. However, this time, Mrs. Isherwood was alone since nobody could join her. On her first night upon arrival, she went to use the bathroom right away. Having finished all of her business, the woman returned to the bedroom. But when Miss Isherwood closed the door behind her, the doorknob stayed in her hand. This meant she wouldn't be able to get out of the room. Suddenly, the woman realized she wasn't in the bedroom. It was an airing cupboard. In Britain, that's what they call a cramped, dark closet used to allow damp laundry to fully dry. Alternatively, people could just store things in it. However, the woman didn't panic. She was a former police officer, strong, resilient, and well-trained. First, Mrs. Isherwood took down the shelves, relied on touch to explore the cupboard, and stumbled upon a brass pipe. Then she chipped off a piece of the pipe and picked at the door and then the walls in the hope of freeing herself. But the broken pipe started leaking water on the woman, and soon, Mrs. Isherwood was freezing. A week later, the resort's chief technician noticed a hole in the airing cupboard's wall and took a peek through it. There, the man saw the lifeless body of Elizabeth Isherwood. As it turned out, she did manage to punch a hole through one of the walls. However, a painting was hanging there, and the woman seemed to not realize that she was a step away from freedom. The coroner concluded that Mrs. Isherwood could have spent several days fighting for her life and died of hypothermia. Sadly, the water leaking through the broken pipe played hugely into this. In the story of Ashley Summers, water is the key element. Several days before America's Independence Day, Ashley joined her husband and 2 daughters on a holiday near the local lakes. The woman adored spending time near water, so during the long holiday weekend, she enjoyed boating. It was very hot. Ashley barely ate anything, and on the 3rd day of the trip, she started experiencing a splitting headache. After waking up on Independence Day, the woman was feeling even worse. But this was her last chance to spend time near her beloved lakes. So she and her husband went boating again. Suddenly, Ashley felt a horrific thirst. She realized she'd been drinking too little water that whole time, so she must have been dehydrated. In the following 30 minutes, Ashley drank 4 bottles of water, but her condition didn't improve. Moreover, the woman started complaining of numbness and pins and needles in her toes. When the family was on their way back home, Ashley began to feel dizzy, and when they drove into the garage, the woman got out of the car, took a few steps, and collapsed, unconscious. Her husband rushed to perform CPR on her, and her eldest daughter called the ambulance. The woman was found to have a severe brain swelling that seemed to have appeared for no reason. 2 days later, Ashley Summers passed away. The cause of her death was absolutely shocking. The woman had water poisoning. The thing is, if you gulp several liters of water down, your body's fluid and electrolyte balance will get disrupted. That is, there'll be too much fluid and virtually important salts such as sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium will get washed out of the body. It doesn't sound too bad, but it has such a great impact on the body's functioning that people start experiencing dizziness, seizures, and severe swelling. In rare cases, such as the one with Ashley Summers, it can result in death. Sadly, Ashley wasn't aware of such a possibility and couldn't have averted it. The young Acton Beale, on the other hand, must definitely have known what he was going to do. On a May night of 2016, when he and his friends came to his place in the Australian town of Kangaroo Point, Acton decided to do planking. Australia was experiencing a wave of a popular flash mob, which involved people lying face down while keeping their bodies straight. They do this in most unexpected places, which were often highly dangerous. So, at around 4:30 in the morning of that day, Acton decided to do his most extreme planking attempt yet. He went to the balcony on the 7th floor and tried to lie down on a railing that was just 5 centimeters wide. His friends were filming this process and getting ready to take a historic photo. Suddenly, the building dwellers heard a loud explosion, but they had no idea what had caused it. It was Acton who'd failed to stay on the railing and fell from a height of over 20 meters. Terrified, his friends called the ambulance, but the medics didn't manage to get Acton's heart to beat again. According to the official data, this was the first registered death that happened while planking. The most horrible thing is that it was all done for likes on social media. So I'm asking you to ensure your safety before doing something like this. I admit, however, that sometimes a silly trick can seem exciting, strange, or even disgusting, but still pretty safe. That's probably what Edward Archibald thought too, when he said yes to a very unexpected competition at a local store. I'll ask now that folks with entomophobia, sensitive people, and those who are eating to not look at the screen. We're going to talk about eating insects. It's a totally normal practice in many African and Asian countries, and China is experiencing a cockroach-eating boom. The insects are being grown at special farms for that purpose. However, this isn't part of the usual cuisine for Americans and Europeans. That's why the competition organized by a Florida pet store in which Edward Archibald took part was disgusting, shocking, and attention-grabbing. Almost 30 participants ate insects alive, competing for the main prize, a live python. Edward didn't need a snake, however. As a party guy and someone who liked to show off, he just couldn't miss out on an event like this. The competition consisted of several rounds, each lasting for 4 minutes. Each time, the treats were different. In the last but one round, the participants ate worms, and in the last one, roaches up to 7 centimeters in size. Edward stuffed his mouth with all the insects at once and tried to swallow them, while the rest of the participants swallowed them one by one, washing them down with water. After hearing the finish signal, Edward victoriously beat his chest with his fists and opened his mouth, demonstrating that he'd swallowed the roaches. After a short wrap-up, Edward was announced as the winner. The contest host joked that Edward would probably vomit and then return for his congratulations and prizes. That didn't happen, however. Edward was found unconscious near the pet shop entrance. When he was taken to the hospital, the doctors could only pronounce him dead. This was shocking, since not a single one of the other 30 participants felt even slightly unwell. However, the coroner's verdict was even more astounding. Edward had died of asphyxiation because insect body parts had blocked his airways. Although the public was stunned by the man's eerie death, many also wondered why anyone would organize such a bizarre contest or take part in it. Psychologists explain that the answer is actually quite simple. Participants in extreme, unsettling, or disgusting events are often searching for something to make their lives more interesting, fulfilling, and vibrant. So, if you have a similar craving for excitement, just watch videos on my channel and leave the roaches to exterminators.